The fog you can't shake. You wake up. 7 hours of sleep behind you. And yet, before your feet even touch the floor, the weight hits. Your brain feels wrapped in cotton, thick, dense, immovable. You go through the motions, brew coffee, sit at your desk, open emails, read the same line 3 times. Nothing sticks. You are present in body, but mentally you are miles away, trapped behind a wall of static. You tell yourself it's a slow morning. You promise the weekend will fix it. But the fog doesn't lift. It never truly lifts. This isn't tiredness, not the kind a nap can fix, not the kind a coffee can chase away. This is mental exhaustion, the silent, invisible saboteur of your focus, your productivity, your happiness. It whispers in your chest as you snap at loved ones. It slows your work until small tasks become emergencies. It makes even doing nothing feel overwhelming. And most people fight it the wrong way. They push harder, work longer, drink more caffeine, force their brains to focus. But that only deepens the drain. This is the hidden danger nobody warns you about. The exhaustion you cannot see, the weight you cannot touch, but that is quietly running you down. In this journey, we'll dissect the invisible load you carry, explore how decision fatigue and emotional labor are draining your energy, and, most importantly, show how to recharge your mind. The fog is thick, the weight is heavy, but it does not have to be permanent. It is time to clear the air. Chapter 1. The Invisible Weight. You wake up. The alarm cuts through the silence, and for a moment you just lie there. You are not physically unable to move. Your muscles work. Your limbs are intact. Yet the simple act of pulling back the covers feels like lifting a heavy stone. You are well rested according to the clock on your nightstand. You secured 8 hours of sleep. You should be fresh. You should be ready, but you are not. There is a heaviness that sits behind your eyes. It is a dense fog that seems to have settled in the spaces between your thoughts. This is not the satisfying ache of a body that has run a marathon or spent a day working in the garden. This is different. This is the feeling of a battery that refuses to hold a charge no matter how long it stays plugged in. This is mental exhaustion. In this chapter, we are going to dismantle the definition of this state. We need to understand what it is and perhaps more importantly, what it is not. We often confuse mental exhaustion with general fatigue or laziness or a lack of motivation. We tell ourselves to just push through it. We drink another cup of coffee. We splash cold water on our faces. We try to force the engine to turn over. But understanding the mechanics of this condition is the first step toward dismantling it. Let us begin by defining what mental exhaustion really is. At its core, mental exhaustion is a state of extreme prolonged cognitive stress. It occurs when the volume of tasks you need to process exceeds your brain's capacity to handle them for an extended period. Think of your brain not as a muscle, but as a complex processing unit. Every decision you make draws power. Every email you read draws power. Every emotion you suppress and every distraction you fight consumes energy. When you are mentally exhausted, your brain has been operating in overdrive for too long. It is in a state of high alert and high processing without adequate recovery. The result is not just that you feel tired. It is that your executive functions begin to fail. These are the high-level skills that allow you to plan, focus, remember instructions, and handle multiple tasks successfully. It is crucial to distinguish this from physical tiredness. When you are physically tired, your body sends clear signals. Your eyelids are heavy. Your limbs feel slow. Physical tiredness is often localized and logical. You ran 5 miles so your legs hurt. You moved furniture so your back is stiff. The remedy for physical tiredness is usually straightforward. You rest. You sleep. And typically the body repairs itself. The soreness fades and the energy returns. Mental exhaustion is far more insidious. It creates a disconnect between the body and the mind. You might have a body that is perfectly capable of going for a walk or cleaning the house, but a mind that cannot summon the will to initiate the action. Or conversely, you might be lying in bed desperate for sleep, but your mind is racing at 100 miles an hour. This is a key distinction. Physical exhaustion usually leads to sleep. Mental exhaustion often destroys it. This brings us to the concept of the silent danger. Why do we call it silent? We call it silent because it does not bleed. It does not bruise. There is no cast you can wear on your brain to signal to the world that you are injured. If you walked into work on crutches, people would rush to hold the door for you. They would offer to carry your coffee. They would understand immediately why you are moving slowly. But when you walk into work mentally exhausted, you look exactly the same as you did yesterday. You smile, you nod, you say good morning. But inside you are operating through a thick veil of static. Because there are no visible symptoms, we often do not receive empathy from others. Even worse, we rarely offer empathy to ourselves. We live in a culture that valorizes the grind. We applaud the person who stays late. We admire the multitasker. We treat stress as a badge of honor. In this environment, admitting that your mind is tired feels like a confession of weakness. So we silence the signal. We ignore the warning lights flashing on the dashboard of our consciousness. We tell ourselves that everyone else is tired too, so we have no right to complain. This normalization is what makes mental exhaustion so dangerous. It allows the condition to fester and deepen until it causes significant damage. It is like driving a car with a slow oil leak. You can keep driving for miles. You can ignore the smell. You can ignore the stain on the driveway. But eventually the engine will seize. So how do you know if you are dangerously close to that seizing point? What are the signs that you are not just tired but mentally drained? The signs are often subtle at first. They creep into your life so slowly that you accept them as your new personality. The first major sign is irritability. This is often the canary in the coal mine. You find yourself snapping at your spouse for asking a simple question. You feel a flash of rage when a website takes 3 seconds too long to load. You feel an intense, unreasonable annoyance when your phone buzzes. This happens because your brain has lost its buffer. Coping with small frustrations requires mental energy. When your tank is empty, you have no resources left to manage your reactions. You go from 0 to angry in a split second because you have lost the ability to regulate. The second sign is a decline in productivity, accompanied by an increase in effort. You are sitting at your desk. You are staring at the document. You have been reading the same paragraph for 10 minutes, but the words are not registering. You are trying harder than ever. You are putting in more hours, yet you are getting less done. It feels like trying to run through waist-deep water. The resistance is immense. This is the hallmark of cognitive fatigue. Your processing speed has slowed down. Another clear indicator is sensory sensitivity. When your brain is exhausted, it loses the ability to filter out irrelevant data. Suddenly, the lights in the office seem too bright. The background music in the coffee shop is too loud. The texture of your shirt feels annoying against your skin. A healthy brain dampens these inputs so you can focus. An exhausted brain lets everything in at once, leading to a state of overwhelm. Then there is the emotional numbness. This is a defense mechanism. When the demand for emotional processing becomes too high, the brain simply shuts down the intake valve. You might find that you don't care about things that used to matter to you. You feel detached from your friends. You feel cynical about your work. It is not that you are depressed necessarily, but rather that you are in a state of emotional conservation. You don't have the energy to feel, so you feel nothing. Finally, there is the inability to make decisions. We call this decision fatigue. It manifests in trivial ways. You stand in the grocery aisle staring at 2 different jars of pasta sauce, and you are completely unable to pick one. The choice feels monumental. Or you finish your workday, and you cannot decide what to watch on television, so you scroll through menus for 45 minutes until it is time to sleep. Your brain has made too many choices during the day, and it has simply gone on strike. These signs are the language of your mind begging for a break. It is important to understand that this accumulation of fatigue does not happen overnight. It is a slow stacking of weights. Imagine you are holding a glass of water. It is light. You can hold it easily. But if you hold it for an hour, your arm begins to ache. If you hold it for a day, your arm will go numb and eventually become paralyzed with pain. The weight of the water has not changed. The glass is not heavier, but the duration of the holding has made the burden unbearable. Mental exhaustion is the result of holding the glass for too long without setting it down. The weights we carry are often invisible responsibilities. It is the weight of remembering to pay the bills, the weight of navigating office politics, the weight of worrying about your aging parents, the weight of processing the constant stream of tragic news from around the world. Each of these is a tab open in your browser. You might not be looking at them right now, but they are running in the background, eating up your RAM and slowing down your entire system. We often think we are resting when we are not. This is a critical error in our modern understanding of recovery. You finish a long day of work where your brain was taxed with spreadsheets and meetings. You collapse onto the sofa and you open your phone. You spend 2 hours scrolling through social media. You think this is rest because your body is stationary, but your brain is still processing. It is processing images. It is reading text. It is comparing your life to others. It is reacting to headlines. It is judging comments. This is not rest. This is just a different kind of work. It is like trying to cool down a computer by running a different high-intensity program. This failure to truly rest is a primary driver of the mental exhaustion epidemic. The impact of this state ripples out into every area of your life. We will explore the specific physical and social costs in later chapters, but for now, simply recognize the immediate consequence. You are living life at half capacity. You are present in body, but absent in spirit. You are surviving your days rather than experiencing them. When you are mentally exhausted, your judgment is impaired. You are more likely to make impulsive choices. You might choose unhealthy food because you lack the willpower to cook. You might skip the gym because the mental barrier of getting dressed seems insurmountable. You might procrastinate on important tasks, which only creates more stress for tomorrow, creating a vicious cycle. This cycle is self-perpetuating. The more exhausted you are, the less efficient you become. The less efficient you become, the longer your tasks take. The longer your tasks take, the less time you have for rest. And the less rest you get, the more exhausted you become. Breaking this cycle requires a fundamental shift in how we view our mental resources. We must stop treating our focus and energy as infinite commodities. They are finite. They are renewable, but only if we respect the conditions required for renewal. Recognizing the problem is the first act of defiance against it. If you saw yourself in the descriptions of the fog, the irritability or the decision fatigue, do not despair. This is not a permanent state of being. It is a signal. It is a biological feedback loop trying to protect you from total collapse. The brain is resilient. It has a remarkable capacity to heal and recalibrate, but it requires you to listen. It requires you to acknowledge that the heaviness you feel is real and that it deserves attention. As we move forward into the next chapter, we are going to look under the hood. We have identified the feeling. Now we need to identify the sources. We will explore the specific mechanisms of overthinking, the trap of multitasking, and the burden of emotional labor. We will pinpoint exactly where your energy is leaking so that we can begin to plug the holes. You do not have to live in the fog forever. You do not have to accept exhaustion as the price of admission for a productive life. There is a way to set the glass down. But before we can learn to rest, we must learn to see the weight we are carrying. You have taken the first step. You have named the ghost in the machine. Thank you for listening to this segment. If you are finding value in this exploration of the mind and want to ensure you catch every chapter of this guide to reclaiming your mental energy, please take a moment to subscribe. Your support helps us continue to produce this content. Now let us turn the page and continue our journey. Chapter 2. Death by 1,000 notifications. Imagine for a moment that you are holding a glass of water. It is not heavy. You could hold it for a minute without any trouble. You could hold it for 5 minutes and you might feel a slight twinge in your wrist. But if you hold that glass of water for an hour, your arm will ache. If you hold it for a day, your arm will go numb and feel paralyzed. The weight of the glass does not change, but the longer you hold it, the heavier it becomes. This is the perfect metaphor for the causes of mental exhaustion. It is rarely one massive traumatic event that breaks us. It is the accumulation of tiny, seemingly insignificant weights that we refuse to put down. In the modern world, these weights often arrive in the form of a beep, a buzz, or a flash on a screen. We live in an era of unprecedented connectivity. We have access to the sum of human knowledge in our pockets. We can talk to anyone, anywhere at any time. Yet this miracle of technology has come with a steep hidden price tag. We are paying for this convenience with our attention, our focus, and ultimately our mental energy. Let us look closely at the primary engine of this exhaustion. We call it information overload, but a more accurate description might be attention fragmentation. Consider your typical morning. The alarm goes off on your smartphone. Before your feet even touch the floor, you have likely disabled the alarm and immediately tapped on a notification. Maybe it is an email from your boss. Maybe it is a breaking news alert about a disaster halfway across the world. Maybe it is a social media comment that irritates you. In those first 60 seconds of consciousness, your brain has shifted gears multiple times. You went from a state of rest to a state of reactive alert. You have not even brushed your teeth yet, but your mind is already racing, processing data, making judgments, and reacting emotionally. This is the phenomenon of death by 1,000 notifications. Every time your phone pings, it demands a micropayment of your energy. It forces your brain to switch tasks. You might think you are good at ignoring it. You might glance at the screen, see it is just a marketing email, and put the phone back down. You assume this cost you nothing. You would be wrong. Neuroscientists and psychologists have studied what happens when our focus is interrupted. There is a concept known as the switching cost. When you are deep in thought, working on a report, or even just enjoying a quiet cup of coffee and a notification interrupts you, your brain has to stop what it is doing. It has to reorient itself to the new stimulus, decide if it is a threat or an opportunity, and then attempt to return to the original task. Studies suggest it can take an average of 23 minutes to get back to the same level of deep focus you had before the interruption. Now, do the math. If you receive a notification every 10 minutes, you are never actually entering a state of deep focus. You are perpetually skimming the surface constantly in a state of cognitive triage. Your brain is running its engine at redline just to stay in neutral. This constant state of alert triggers a subtle but persistent release of stress hormones. We are not designed to be on call 24 hours a day. Our ancestors needed to be alert for predators, but once the danger passed, they rested. Today the lion is not in the tall grass. The lion is in your pocket and it buzzes every time someone likes your photo. But notifications are only one head of the hydra. The second major cause of mental exhaustion is decision fatigue. We tend to think of decision-making as something we do only when we are at a crossroads. Taking a new job, buying a house, choosing a partner. In reality, you are making thousands of decisions every single day, and each one consumes a finite resource called mental energy. What should I wear today? What should I have for breakfast? Should I answer this email now or later? Should I take the highway or the back roads? Which brand of toothpaste should I buy? Is this caption witty enough for my post? Some of these decisions matter, most of them do not. But to your brain, the metabolic cost of processing these choices adds up. This is why you might find yourself paralyzed at the end of a long workday, standing in the grocery store aisle, staring at 2 different jars of pasta sauce, unable to choose one. It is not that you do not know the difference between marinara and Alfredo. It is that your decision-making battery is empty. You have hit the wall. This phenomenon explains why many highly successful individuals simplify their lives to an extreme degree. It is why certain tech moguls and politicians wear the same style of suit or shirt every single day. They are not fashion blind. They are ruthlessly eliminating low-value decisions to save their mental energy for high-stakes choices. When we combine the barrage of digital notifications with the relentless demand for decision-making, we create a perfect storm for exhaustion. But there is a third element that makes the modern condition particularly draining. That element is the myth of multitasking. Society often praises the multitasker. We wear our busyness like a badge of honor. We answer emails while on conference calls. We listen to podcasts while writing reports. We text while watching movies. We believe we are being efficient. We believe we are getting more done in less time. The science tells a different and more alarming story. The human brain is incapable of true multitasking when it comes to attention-heavy tasks. We cannot parallel process two conscious thoughts simultaneously. What we are actually doing is rapid task switching. Imagine you are painting a wall. Multitasking is like painting one stroke, putting down the brush, picking up a hammer, hitting a nail, once putting down the hammer, picking up the brush and painting another stroke. You are doing both jobs, but you are doing them slowly, poorly, and with enormous wasted effort. Every time you switch contexts, you burn glucose, the fuel your brain needs to function. When you force your brain to toggle back and forth between a spreadsheet and a text conversation, you are draining your tank twice as fast for half the result. The outcome is not efficiency. The outcome is a brain that feels like mush by 3 p.m. We have covered the digital noise, the decision load, and the multitasking trap. However, there is a fourth cause of mental exhaustion that is often the most insidious, because it is the most invisible. This is emotional labour. Emotional labour is the effort it takes to manage your feelings and the feelings of others. It is the act of putting on a brave face when you are worried. It is listening to a friend vent about their problems when you are already overwhelmed. It is the constant low-level anxiety of worrying about the future, your finances, or the safety of your family. In the past, our sphere of concern was limited to our immediate village. We knew the troubles of our neighbours and our kin. Today, through the window of our screens, we are exposed to the tragedies of the entire world. We scroll through our feeds and see a war in one post, a famine in the next, and a political scandal in the third. Our brains are wired for empathy. We are social creatures. When we see distress, we feel a physiological response. We want to help. We want to understand. But we cannot help everyone and we cannot fix everything. This creates a state of empathy fatigue. We are constantly emotionally engaged but powerless to act. We carry the weight of the world's pain in addition to our own. This is not just a metaphorical weight. It manifests as physical tension and deep mental weariness. Furthermore, in our professional lives, we are often required to suppress our true emotions. We must be polite to rude customers. We must remain calm during stressful meetings. We must project confidence when we feel insecure. This act of suppression is heavy work. It requires the prefrontal cortex to actively inhibit the emotional centers of the brain. It is literally a wrestling match happening inside your skull. If you do this for 8 hours a day, you will come home exhausted, even if you sat in a chair the entire time. You have not run a marathon with your legs, but you have run one with your mind. It is important to recognize that these causes often feed into one another. When you are emotionally drained from a difficult day, you are more likely to succumb to decision fatigue. You order the unhealthy takeout food because you cannot summon the energy to cook. Because you are tired, you scroll through social media for a hit of dopamine, which leads to information overload and fragmentation. You stay up too late because you are seeking what psychologists call revenge bedtime procrastination, trying to reclaim some time for yourself. This leads to a lack of sleep, which makes you more vulnerable to stress the next day. It is a vicious cycle. The tools that were supposed to liberate us have become our jailers. The devices that were meant to connect us have fragmented our attention. The abundance of choice has paralyzed our will. We must stop looking for a single villain. It is not just the smartphone. It is not just the job. It is not just the news. It is the cumulative load of all these things continuously pressing down on a biological system that was not evolved to handle them. We are treating our minds like infinite vessels. We pour information requests and worries into them without ever checking if the vessel is full. We assume that if we just try harder, if we just organize better, if we just sleep a little less, we can fit it all in. But the brain is a biological organ. It has limits. Just as your stomach can only hold so much food, and your muscles can only lift so much weight, your brain can only process so much information before it begins to malfunction. The signs of this malfunction are what we often ignore. We mistake them for laziness or a lack of discipline. When you find yourself reading the same sentence 3 times without understanding it, that is not laziness. That is your brain telling you it is full. When you snap at your partner for asking a simple question that is not a character flaw, that is your emotional battery flashing red. Recognizing these causes is the first step toward breaking the cycle. You cannot fix a problem you do not understand. You have to see the notifications for what they are, demands on your life force. You have to see the multitasking for what it is, a thief of productivity. You must acknowledge that caring is work and that decisions are expensive. As we move forward, we need to understand exactly what is happening under the hood when this exhaustion sets in. This is not just a feeling, it is a physical state. In the next chapter, we will open up the machinery of the mind. We will explore the hidden impact on your brain, from the chemical imbalances to the structural changes that occur when we push ourselves too far. We will see why memory starts to slip, why focus becomes impossible, and why the fog seems to thicken the harder we try to fight it. We have identified the enemy outside. Now it is time to look at the damage inside. Chapter 3. The spinning wheel. You know the symbol. It might be a small hourglass, a blue rotating circle, or a multicolored pinwheel spinning endlessly in the center of your computer screen. It appears when the system is overwhelmed. You click the mouse, but nothing happens. You try to close a window, but it stays open. You type a sentence, but the letters do not appear. The processor is running, the fans are whirring loudly, and the machine is heating up, yet on the surface, absolutely nothing is getting done. This is the perfect metaphor for the third stage of mental exhaustion. We call this chapter the spinning wheel, because that is exactly what your brain begins to do. After the invisible weight of daily stress and the relentless death by 1,000 notifications, your cognitive machinery simply stalls. It enters a state of buffering. In this chapter, we are going to look under the hood. We need to understand the hidden impact mental exhaustion has on your brain's actual performance. This is not just about feeling tired or needing a nap. This is about a fundamental breakdown in how you process reality, how you regulate your emotions, and how you perceive the world around you. When you are physically tired, your muscles ache and your limbs feel heavy. When you are mentally exhausted, the symptoms are often terrifyingly subtle at first. They manifest as a decline in your cognitive sharpness. You might pride yourself on your intellect or your ability to solve problems. You might be the person who can usually juggle 5 tasks at once. But mental exhaustion does not care about your track record. The first casualty is your focus. This is not the standard distraction where you check your phone because you are bored. This is a deeper inability to direct your attention. You might find yourself reading the same paragraph in a book 3 or 4 times, yet the meaning of the words refuses to stick. Your eyes scan the text, but the brain does not encode the information. The connection is broken. You sit in a meeting, nodding along, but 10 minutes later you realize you have no idea what was just agreed upon. The input is there, but the recording light is off. This happens because the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for executive functions like focus, planning, and decision-making, is a massive energy consumer. When your mental energy reserves are depleted by constant low-level stress, the brain enters a conservation mode. It begins to shut down non-essential high-power operations. Unfortunately for you, complex thinking and sustained focus are considered high-power operations. This leads to the second casualty, which is memory. You walk into a room and stop dead in your tracks. You have absolutely no idea why you entered that room. You stand there, looking at the furniture, waiting for a clue that never comes. You forget names of people you have known for years. You lose your keys, your wallet, or your train of thought mid-sentence. It is easy to laugh this off as getting older or just being scatterbrained, but when it stems from mental exhaustion, it signals a specific failure in the brain's filing system. Your working memory is the mental scratch pad where you hold information temporarily. When you are mentally exhausted, that scratch pad is full of static. There is no room to write down where you put your glasses because your brain is still unconsciously processing the stress of the morning commute, the 3 unfinished emails, and the vague sense of dread about tomorrow. As we go deeper, the impact shifts from cognitive to psychological. This brings us back to the image of the spinning wheel. When a computer freezes, it is often because a program is stuck in a loop. It is trying to execute a command that it cannot complete, so it just tries again and again, thousands of times per second. A mentally exhausted brain does the exact same thing. We call this rumination. It is the inability to switch off your thoughts. You lay down in bed, desperate for sleep, but your mind decides that now is the perfect time to replay a conversation from 3 days ago. You analyze what you said. You analyze what they said. You think of a better comeback. You worry about whether you offended them. The loop plays over and over. This is the silent danger of mental exhaustion. You do not have the energy to solve the problem, but you also lack the energy to dismiss it. A healthy, energized brain can say, "I will deal with this tomorrow," and actually mean it. An exhausted brain lacks the inhibitory control to stop the intrusive thoughts. You become a prisoner of your own mind, trapped on a carousel that won't stop spinning. This state of constant mental looping creates a fertile ground for obsession. You might find yourself fixating on small details that do not matter. You obsess over the font choice in a presentation or a minor comment someone made at dinner. Your perspective shrinks. When you have energy, you can see the big picture. You can see the forest. When you are exhausted, you are face to face with the bark of a single tree, convinced that this 1 inch of wood is the entire world. Now we must talk about the emotional cost. This is often the most damaging aspect for your relationships and your self-image. There is a direct link between mental energy and emotional regulation. Think of your emotional control like a muscle. Every time you suppress your anger, force a smile when you're annoyed, or bite your tongue, you are doing a rep. You are lifting a heavy weight. When you are mentally exhausted, that muscle has failed. You have no strength left to lift the weight. The filter between what you feel and what you do dissolves. This manifests as irritability. You might find yourself snapping at your spouse for asking a simple question. You might feel a sudden, intense rage when a driver cuts you off, a rage that feels disproportionate to the event. You are not becoming a bad person. You are simply a depleted person. The buffer zone that usually exists between a stimulus and your reaction has been erased. In a healthy state, there is a pause. Someone drops a glass, you pause, realize it was an accident, and say it is okay. In an exhausted state, the glass drops and you instantly yell. There is no pause because the energy required to create that pause is gone. This emotional instability can swing the other way too. It is not always anger. It can be a sudden fragility. You might find yourself crying over a commercial or feeling an overwhelming sense of despair over a minor setback. The emotional dampeners are offline. Everything feels raw and immediate. This connects directly to anxiety. Mental exhaustion and anxiety are best friends. They feed each other. When your brain is tired, it loses its ability to process risk accurately. A tired brain is a scared brain. From an evolutionary standpoint, if you are exhausted, you are vulnerable to predators. So, your brain compensates by becoming hypervigilant. It scans the environment for threats that aren't there. You start to interpret neutral events as negative. An email from your boss that says, "Please see me," implies you are getting fired. A friend who hasn't texted back must be angry with you. The silence in the house means something is wrong. Your exhausted mind projects danger onto the world because it knows it is too weak to fight, so it tries to survive by anticipating the worst. This creates a vicious cycle. The anxiety burns up even more of your limited energy, which leads to deeper exhaustion, which leads to heightened anxiety. You are trapped in the spinning wheel, generating heat but going nowhere. It is important to recognize that this decline often happens slowly. You do not wake up one day, suddenly unable to focus. It is a gradual erosion. It starts with just one forgotten appointment. It starts with one night of tossing and turning. It starts with one moment of snapping at your child. You justify it. You say you have just had a hard week. You say you need a holiday. But if you do not address the root cause, the spinning wheel does not stop. It eventually crashes the system. The cognitive decline becomes noticeable to others. Your work performance slips. The memory lapses become embarrassing. The emotional outbursts damage your relationships. There is also a profound loss of creativity. Creativity requires a surplus of energy. It requires the brain to make loose connections, to wander, to play. An exhausted brain cannot play. It is in survival mode. It craves rigid routines and known outcomes. If you feel like you have lost your spark, or that you are just going through the motions, this is why. Your brain has shut down the creative department to keep the lights on in the security department. We often try to push through this phase. We treat our brains like machines that just need to be overclocked. We drink more caffeine. We utilize tighter deadlines to force focus. We try to shame ourselves into productivity, but you cannot whip a tired horse into winning a race. You can only whip it until it collapses. The spinning wheel is a signal. It is a request from your operating system to stop new inputs. It is begging for a reboot. But in our modern lives, we rarely grant that request. We just keep clicking. We keep opening tabs. We keep forcing the system to run until the heat becomes unbearable. As we move into the next chapter, we are going to see how this heat transfers from the mind to the body. Because you cannot separate the two. A brain on fire eventually burns the house down. The tension, the stress hormones, and the constant vigilance do not stay trapped in your skull. They travel down your spine, into your stomach, your heart, and your muscles. The cognitive fog you are feeling is just the precursor. The spinning wheel is annoying, but what comes next is painful. In Chapter 4, we will examine the physical cost of mental exhaustion, exploring everything from the disruption of your sleep cycles to the compromise of your immune system. We will see how the silent danger becomes a loud physical reality. But for now, take a breath. Recognize the signs we have just discussed. If you feel the fog, if you feel the irritability, if you feel the loop of repetitive thoughts, do not judge yourself. Do not think you are broken. You are simply buffering, and as we will learn, there are ways to clear the cache and restart the system. But first, we must acknowledge the full extent of the damage. Let us turn our attention to the body. Chapter 4, When the Body Pays the Bill. We tend to operate under a very specific and very incorrect assumption. We believe that our minds and our bodies are separate entities. We treat them like two different neighbours living in the same building but on different floors. We assume that what happens upstairs in the mind stays upstairs. We think that we can worry, stress, overthink, and exhaust our cognitive resources without it affecting the machinery downstairs. We convince ourselves that we can run our mental engine in the red zone day after day, while the body simply sits in the passenger seat, unaffected and detached. This is a dangerous illusion. The mind and the body are not neighbours. They are not even roommates. They are an integrated system, a single loop of feedback and response. When the mind is exhausted, it does not suffer in isolation. It sends the bill to the body, and eventually the body has to pay up. This chapter is about the physical cost of mental exhaustion. We have already explored how this fatigue fogs your memory and dulls your focus. Now we must look at the tangible physical reality of what happens when your brain is overworked. It is not just about feeling tired. It is about a physiological shift that alters your chemistry, your muscle tension, your immune system, and your ability to rest. Let's begin with the most common and frustrating paradox of mental exhaustion. Sleep? Logic suggests that if you are exhausted, you should sleep well. If you run a marathon, your body collapses into deep rest to repair the muscles. Physical exertion leads to physical recovery. But mental exertion often leads to the exact opposite. You are likely familiar with the sensation. You feel drained all day. Your eyes are heavy, your motivation is low, and you spend hours yearning for your pillow. You tell yourself that you just need a good night of sleep to reset. But when you finally lie down and the lights go out, something frustrating happens. Your body is heavy, but your mind lights up like a carnival. You are physically tired, but mentally wired. This is the wired but tired state, and it is a hallmark of mental exhaustion. The reason this happens is rooted in your body's threat detection system. When you are mentally exhausted, it is usually because you have been processing high volumes of information, managing stress, or dealing with anxiety. Your brain interprets this sustained mental load as a threat. To the primitive parts of your brain, A stressful inbox or a looming deadline is not much different from a predator stalking you in the grass. To keep you alert and safe from this perceived danger, your brain floods your system with cortisol and adrenaline. These are mobilizing chemicals. They are designed to keep you awake and ready to react. So even though you are cognitively depleted and desperate for rest, your chemistry is screaming that it is not safe to power down. You lie there, staring at the ceiling, while fragments of the day loop through your consciousness. When you do finally drift off, the sleep you get is often shallow. Mental exhaustion interferes with the architecture of sleep itself. You might wake up frequently, or you may find that you wake up in the morning feeling just as tired as when you went to bed. This creates a vicious cycle. You start the next day with a deficit, which makes the mental exhaustion worse, which makes the sleep harder to come by. The battery never truly recharges. As we move from sleep to the waking hours, we see the next physical manifestation of mental load. This one is often so subtle that you might not notice it until it becomes painful. It is muscle tension. Think about your body right now as you listen to this. Where are your shoulders? Are they relaxed and low, or have they crept up toward your ears? What about your jaw? Are your teeth unclenched? Or are you holding pressure there? How about your stomach? Is it soft? Or is it tight? When the mind is burdened, the body armors itself. This is a subconscious bracing against the weight of the world. We hold our stress in our trapezius muscles, in our necks, and in our lower backs. Over time, this chronic tension restricts blood flow and leads to inflammation. You might experience this as frequent tension headaches. These are the headaches that feel like a tight band wrapped around your forehead or a vice gripping the base of your skull. They are not random. They are the direct result of your scalp and neck muscles contracting in response to mental strain. You might also find yourself dealing with unexplained aches and pains. You haven't been to the gym, you haven't lifted anything heavy, yet your back throbs or your joints ache. This is the somatic expression of your mental state. The body is literally carrying the load you are turning over in your mind. We often try to treat these symptoms with painkillers or massages, addressing the physical effect while ignoring the mental cause. But until the mental load is lightened, the tension will return. The armor stays on because the brain believes the battle is still happening. Beyond the muscles and the sleep cycle, there is a deeper, invisible disruption occurring in your bloodstream. This brings us to the hormonal imbalance caused by chronic mental fatigue. We mentioned cortisol earlier regarding sleep, but its impact goes much further. Cortisol is often called the stress hormone, but it is really a survival hormone. In short bursts, it is miraculous. It mobilizes sugar for energy, it heightens focus, and it suppresses non-essential functions like digestion so you can fight or run. It is a brilliant system for short-term crises. However, modern mental exhaustion is not a short-term crisis. It is a chronic state. When you are constantly overthinking, multitasking, and worrying, you leave the tap of cortisol dripping. Over weeks and months, this creates a toxic environment in the body. Chronically elevated cortisol wreaks havoc on your system. It can lead to weight gain, particularly around the midsection, because your body believes it needs to store energy for a long winter of stress. It can disrupt your digestion, leading to issues like bloating or discomfort, because your body is deprioritizing the breakdown of food to focus on the perceived threat. This hormonal imbalance can also affect your heart. Mental exhaustion keeps your sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight system, engaged. This means your resting heart rate might be higher than normal. Your blood pressure might creep up. You are running the engine of your car at high RPMs while the car is sitting in the driveway. It creates wear and tear on the cardiovascular system that over years can lead to serious health consequences. Perhaps the most insidious way the body pays the bill is through the immune system. Have you ever noticed a peculiar pattern where you get sick as soon as you finally stop working? You push through a difficult project, a chaotic month at work, or a stressful semester at school. You hold it together perfectly while the pressure is on, but the moment you take a vacation, or the first weekend you finally relax, you come down with a cold, the flu, or a migraine. This phenomenon is sometimes called the letdown effect. It happens because stress hormones like cortisol temporarily suppress the immune system to conserve energy for immediate action. As long as you are stressed and running on fumes, your body delays the inflammatory response to viruses and bacteria. You are running on borrowed time. When you finally stop and the mental exhaustion takes over, the stress hormones drop. Your immune system wakes up, realizes there is a backlog of maintenance to do, and reacts aggressively. You get sick because your body finally has the permission to be sick. Furthermore, chronic mental exhaustion weakens your baseline immunity. If you feel like you catch every cold that goes around, or if you feel like you never quite recover to 100% health, look at your mental state. The brain consumes a massive amount of the body's glucose and oxygen, roughly 20% of your total energy intake. When the brain is in overdrive, it is hogging resources. It leaves the rest of the body, including the immune system, underfunded. You become vulnerable. We must also talk about the sensation of fatigue itself. Physical tiredness is usually pleasant. After a long hike or a day of gardening, your body feels heavy in a good way. You feel satisfied. Mental exhaustion feels different. It feels toxic. It is a heaviness that sits in the chest and behind the eyes. It is a lethargy that does not respond to caffeine. You might find yourself reaching for sugar or carbohydrates. This is another physical signal. Your brain, desperate for quick energy to keep the mental loop spinning, signals a craving for glucose. You eat, but the energy spike is temporary, followed by a crash that leaves you feeling even more depleted. You are trying to fuel a runaway train with kindling. This physical deterioration can happen slowly. It is not always a sudden collapse. It is the gradual erosion of your vitality. It is the loss of the spring in your step. It is the dullness in your skin and the dark circles under your eyes that no amount of sleep seems to fix. You might look in the mirror and feel like you have aged faster in the last year than in the previous 5. That is the physical tax of mental overload. There is also a sensory component to this physical cost. When you are mentally exhausted, your tolerance for sensory input drops. Loud noises become physically painful. Bright lights induce headaches. A crowded room feels suffocating. Your nervous system is so frayed that it cannot filter out the background noise of the world. Everything feels too sharp, too loud, and too close. This leads to a physical need to withdraw, to curl up in a dark room and shut out the world. It is a protective mechanism, your body trying to build a wall to shield a fragile mind. It is important to recognize these signs as serious warning lights. We live in a culture that encourages us to push through. We drink more coffee. We take painkillers for the headaches. We ignore the insomnia. We treat the body like a machine that just needs a little more grease to keep running. But the body is not a machine. It is a biological ecosystem. When you experience these physical symptoms, your body is communicating with you. It is using the only language it has, sensation and pain, to tell you that the mind is in trouble. The headache is a message. The insomnia is a message. The stomach ache is a message. They are telling you that the mental load has exceeded your capacity to carry it safely. Ignoring these physical signals is dangerous. It is the equivalent of covering up the check engine light on your dashboard with a piece of tape and continuing to drive on the highway. You might get a few more miles down the road, but the inevitable breakdown will be catastrophic. If you identify with these descriptions, if you feel the tension in your shoulders and the heaviness in your chest, you need to understand that this is not a medical mystery. It is the physiology of exhaustion. You cannot cure these physical symptoms solely with physical remedies. You cannot sleep your way out of it if your mind is still racing. You cannot massage away the tension if you immediately return to the mental patterns that created it. To heal the body, you must address the mind. This realization is the first step toward reclaiming your health. You must accept that your mental state has biological consequences. Every thought, every worry, and every decision consumes energy and triggers a chemical response. When you respect this connection, you stop fighting your body and start listening to it. However, there is a point where mental exhaustion crosses a line. When these physical symptoms persist for too long, when the cynicism sets in, and when the battery refuses to recharge no matter how much you rest, we enter a darker territory. We move from simple exhaustion into a state of total depletion. In the next chapter, we will distinguish between being tired and being burned out. We will look at what happens when the temporary state of mental exhaustion becomes a chronic condition that threatens your career, your identity, and your zest for life. We will explore the fine line between needing a break and needing a total overhaul of how you live. But for now, take a breath, drop your shoulders, unclench your jaw, and listen to what your body has been trying to tell you. Chapter 5. The Edge of the Cliff. We have spent the last 4 chapters mapping the geography of your mind under siege. We have talked about the fog that settles over your thoughts. We have discussed the relentless barrage of notifications that fractures your attention. We have watched the wheel of obsessive thoughts spin until the gears strip. We have even catalogued the physical receipts your body keeps when your brain refuses to rest. Now we arrive at a critical juncture. This is the point where the terrain changes. Imagine you have been walking uphill with a heavy backpack for days. Your legs burn, your breath is short, your shoulders ache. That is mental exhaustion. It is painful and it is heavy, but you are still walking. You are still moving forward. You are still engaged with the journey, even if you resent the weight. Now imagine you reach a point where you simply sit down on the path. It is not just that your legs hurt. It is that you no longer see the point of the summit. You no longer care about the backpack. You no longer care about the view. You just stop. That is the edge of the cliff. That is the difference between mental exhaustion and burnout. Many people use these terms interchangeably. You hear it in casual conversation all the time. Someone says they are burnt out because they had a hard week at the office. Someone claims they are suffering from burnout because they studied for an exam all night. In most cases, they are describing acute mental exhaustion. This is an important distinction because the remedy for exhaustion is rest. The remedy for burnout is much more complex because burnout is not just a depletion of energy. It is a depletion of spirit. To understand where you stand, it is necessary to look at the 3 distinct dimensions that separate these 2 states. The first dimension is emotional engagement. When you are mentally exhausted, you are usually overengaged. You care too much. You are drowning in responsibilities. You are frantically trying to keep all the balls in the air. You feel every email like a physical blow. You worry intensely about the quality of your work. You are hyper-aware of the time you do not have. Your emotions are volatile. You might snap at a partner or cry in your car, but those reactions come from a place of heightened sensitivity. You are like a live wire that is carrying too much current. Burnout is the opposite. Burnout is about disengagement. When you cross the line from exhaustion into burnout, the anxiety quiets down, but it is replaced by something far more dangerous. It is replaced by numbness. You stop caring. The emails pile up and you simply do not feel the urge to open them. The deadlines pass and you feel a strange sense of detachment. The emotions do not surge, they flatten. You become blunt. This is a defense mechanism. Your brain realizes that the high voltage of exhaustion is unsustainable, so it cuts the power. The lights go out. This leads us to the second dimension, which is cynicism. Mental exhaustion makes you feel weak. It makes you feel like you are not good enough to handle the pressure. You blame yourself. You think that if you just worked harder or organized your calendar better, you could catch up. You internalize the struggle. Burnout shifts the blame outward. It breeds a deep, heavy cynicism toward your work and the people around you. You start to view your job, your family, or your obligations as sources of resentment. You might find yourself thinking that your boss is incompetent, or that your clients are ungrateful, or that your family demands too much. You begin to distance yourself psychologically from what you do. You treat people like objects or obstacles rather than human beings. This is the depersonalization aspect of burnout. It is the feeling that nothing you do matters, so why bother doing it well? The third dimension is a sense of inefficacy. When you are merely exhausted, you can still envision a finish line. You can imagine a future where the project is done, and you can finally sleep. You believe that success is possible, even if it is currently out of reach. When you are burnt out, you lose the ability to see a positive outcome. You feel trapped. You feel like a hamster on a wheel running fast but going nowhere. It is a profound sense of futility. You convince yourself that no matter how hard you work, nothing will change. The system is rigged. The game is lost. This is why vacations rarely cure burnout. You can take a week off and sit on a beach, but the moment you return to your normal life, the same sense of hopelessness washes over you immediately. You did not just need a break. You needed a different life. Understanding these differences is vital because mental exhaustion is the gateway drug to burnout. No one wakes up one morning completely burnt out without warning. It is a slow erosion. It is the Grand Canyon carved by a river of stress over time. Let us look at how this happens in the real world. Consider the case of a mid-level manager. Let us call him David. David is a high performer. He has always been the first one in the office and the last one to leave. For the first few years of his career, he runs on adrenaline and ambition. He takes on extra projects. He answers emails at midnight. He is mentally exhausted constantly. He complains about being tired. He drinks 4 cups of coffee a day. He snaps at his wife when she asks him about his day. But he is still David. He still wants to win. He is still fighting. This is the phase of chronic mental exhaustion. The stress hormones in his body are constantly elevated. His brain is in a permanent state of high alert. He is tired, but he is wired. Then the shift happens. It is subtle at first. David stops getting that little hit of dopamine when he finishes a project. He stops feeling proud of his team. He starts looking at his calendar with a sense of dread that sits heavy in his gut. One Tuesday, he sits in a meeting and realizes he has not heard a word anyone has said for 20 minutes. He looks around the table and thinks that none of this matters. He feels like a ghost in his own life. He stops fighting. He stops trying to optimize his schedule. He starts doing the bare minimum to not get fired. He becomes cynical about the company mission. He withdraws from his colleagues. He is no longer exhausted in the sense that he needs sleep. He is exhausted in the soul. He has walked off the edge of the cliff and is now in free fall. The danger here is that David can likely sustain this state of burnout for a long time before he crashes completely. This is what we call high-functioning burnout. You go through the motions. You show up. You smile when required. You type the words, but the engine is gone. You are coasting on momentum and muscle memory. This state is incredibly destructive because it hollows you out from the inside. It is not just the corporate world where this cliff exists. It is perhaps even more prevalent and less discussed in the realm of parenthood and caregiving. Imagine a mother named Eleanor. She has 2 young children and an aging parent she cares for. For years she operates in a state of frantic mental exhaustion. She is the keeper of the schedules. She remembers the doctor appointments and the allergies and the birthdays. She manages the emotional climate of the house. Her mind is a browser with 300 tabs open. She is constantly anxious that she is forgetting something. She is tired deep in her bones, but she loves fiercely. She worries because she cares. She sacrifices sleep because she wants her family to thrive. If this mental load is never lifted, if she never gets support eventually, she too approaches the cliff. The transition for Eleanor is terrifying. It manifests as a sudden inability to feel empathy. One day her child cries, and instead of feeling an instinct to comfort, she feels a cold wave of irritation. She feels an urge to walk out the door and never come back. This thought terrifies her. She thinks she is a monster. She does not realize she is simply burnt out. Her empathy reserves are dry. The emotional labor has bankrupted her nervous system. She moves from the anxiety of trying to be perfect to the apathy of just trying to survive the hour. She stops engaging with her children's stories. She stops planning special meals. She retreats into her phone or into silence. She is present physically, but emotionally she has checked out. This is the silent tragedy of the cliff. It steals your personality. It steals the very things that make you who you are. Your passion, your empathy, your drive, and your joy are all casualties of the fall. The slide from mental exhaustion to burnout is often catalyzed by a lack of recognition. We live in a culture that praises the hustle. We applaud the person who sleeps 4 hours. We value output over sustainability. Because of this, we often ignore the warning signs of exhaustion until it is too late. We think that if we just push a little harder, we will break through. But biology does not work that way. The brain is an organ with limits. When you push a machine past its red line for too long, it does not just slow down. It breaks. There is a specific mechanism at play here. When you are under chronic stress, your brain is flooded with cortisol. In short bursts, cortisol is useful. It helps you focus and react to danger. But when cortisol levels remain high for months or years, it actually becomes toxic to the brain. It begins to damage the hippocampus, which is the part of the brain responsible for memory and emotional regulation. At the same time, it strengthens the amygdala, which is the fear center of the brain. So structurally, your brain changes. You become less capable of handling stress and more reactive to it. You lose the ability to see the big picture. You lose your cognitive flexibility. This physical change underpins the psychological shift toward burnout. You literally cannot think your way out of it because the machinery you use to think has been compromised. Recognizing that you are on the edge of the cliff requires brutal honesty. You have to look past the surface symptom of tiredness. You have to ask yourself harder questions. Ask yourself if you have become cynical. Ask yourself if you have lost the ability to laugh at mistakes. Ask yourself if you feel effective in your life, or if you feel like a passenger in a car driven by someone else. Ask yourself if you are relieved when plans are cancelled, not because you need time to work, but because you cannot bear the thought of interacting with people. If you answer yes to these questions, you are likely no longer just mentally exhausted. You are drifting into the territory of burnout. The problem with falling off the cliff is that the climb back up is much harder than the walk that brought you there. Recovering from exhaustion might take a weekend of deep sleep and a digital detox. Recovering from burnout can take months or even years. It often requires a complete restructuring of your life, your values, and your daily habits. It requires rebuilding the trust you have in yourself. There is also a phenomenon known as brownout. This is the phase just before the full burnout. It is like a dimming of the lights. You are not fully dark yet, but the voltage is low. You are operating at low power mode. You cut corners. You withdraw socially. You stop volunteering ideas. You become invisible. This is the final warning sign. This is the moment where you are standing with your toes over the edge of the precipice, looking down into the fog. If you are in this phase, you still have agency. You can still step back. But you cannot do it by using the same strategies that got you here. You cannot work your way out of a problem caused by overwork. You cannot think your way out of a problem caused by overthinking. We must also dispel the myth that burnout is a badge of honor. It is not a sign that you are important or successful. It is a sign of malfunction. It is a sign that the system has failed. In a machine, we call it a breakdown. In a building, we call it a structural collapse. In a human being, we often call it a midlife crisis or a depressive episode. But the root is often this prolonged, unaddressed erosion of mental energy. The scariest part of the cliff is that it feels safe to jump. When you are in pain, the idea of feeling nothing is attractive. The numbness of burnout can feel like relief, compared to the frantic anxiety of exhaustion. Giving up feels like a solution, but it is a trap. The numbness is not peace. It is a suspension of life. It is a grey waiting room where time passes, but you do not grow. As we move forward into the next chapter, we are going to explore how this internal collapse spills outward. We have looked at what happens inside your head. Now we must look at the blast radius. When you fall off the cliff, you do not fall alone. You take your relationships, your friendships, and your social connections down with you. Mental exhaustion makes you irritable, but burnout makes you isolated. It builds walls that are very difficult to breach. It convinces you that you are alone in your struggle, and that no one else can understand or help. It severs the very connections that could save you. So take a moment now. Assess your position on the map. Are you hiking uphill with burning legs? Or are you sitting on the path staring at the ground feeling nothing at all? Are you tired? Or are you empty? Knowing the difference is the first step in stepping back from the edge. The fog we spoke of in the beginning has now become a void. And the only way to avoid the void is to recognize that you are standing right next to it. You do not have to jump. You do not have to fall. But you do have to stop walking the path that led you here. You have to acknowledge that the strategy of endurance has reached its limit. The human will is a powerful thing, but it cannot override the biological reality of energy. You are finite. And that is not a flaw. It is simply the truth. In the next segment, we will examine the social toll of this condition. We will see how mental exhaustion acts as a silent saboteur in your interactions with the people you love most. We will see how it twists communication and breeds conflict where there should be connection. We will see how the cliff edge cuts through the living room and the dinner table. But for now, just breathe, acknowledge the weight, and respect the warning signs. The cliff is real, but so is the ground beneath your feet. You are still here, and as long as you are here, you can turn around. Chapter 6. The Wall Between Us. You walk through the door after a long day. You take off your shoes and set down your keys. You hear a voice from the other room asking how your day was. It is a simple question. It is a question born of love and interest. But in your mind, it feels like an interrogation. It feels like a demand. You have spent the last 10 hours making decisions and processing information and managing crises. Your battery is not just low, it is dead. You mutter a one-word answer and retreat to the bedroom or the bathroom just to have 5 minutes of silence. You are physically present in your home, but you are emotionally absent. This is the most insidious cost of mental exhaustion. We often talk about how fatigue affects our work or our health, but we rarely discuss how it dismantles our relationships. We call this Chapter 6 the wall between us, because that is exactly what mental fatigue builds. It constructs a barrier made of silence and irritability and withdrawal. It turns the people who should be your source of comfort into another source of stress. The human brain has a limited capacity for self-regulation and empathy. These are high-level cognitive functions. They require a significant amount of glucose and oxygen. They require energy. When you are mentally exhausted, your brain enters a state of conservation. It begins to shut down non-essential systems to preserve what is left for basic survival. Unfortunately, your brain often categorizes social niceties and patience and active listening as non-essential. This leads to the first major casualty of relationship fatigue, which is the loss of emotional regulation. Think about the last time you snapped at your partner or your child or a friend. Maybe they asked a simple question about dinner. Maybe they made a small mistake, like spilling water on the counter. Under normal circumstances, you would have laughed it off. You would have been patient. But when your brain is exhausted, your emotional fuse is non-existent. You lose the buffer zone between a stimulus and your reaction. Psychologists refer to this as a depletion of executive function. Your executive function is the CEO of your brain. It manages your impulses. It tells you to take a deep breath before you speak. It reminds you that your spouse is not the enemy. But when the CEO is asleep at the wheel, the primitive parts of your brain take over. You enter a fight or flight response over a dirty dish. You react with disproportionate anger or frustration. Afterwards, you likely feel a wave of guilt. You know that your reaction was unfair. You promise yourself you will do better next time. But without recharging your mental energy, you find yourself snapping again the very next day. The damage goes deeper than just irritability. Mental exhaustion fundamentally alters how you process communication. Listening is an active sport. It requires you to track words and interpret tone and read body language and formulate a response. This is a complex neural dance. When you are drained, you physically cannot sustain this effort. You might find yourself staring at a friend while they tell you a story and realizing you have not heard a word they said for the last 2 minutes. You are nodding and smiling, but the lights are off. This is the phenomenon of the hollow presence. You are there, but you are not there. Your loved ones can feel this. Humans are incredibly perceptive social animals. We can tell when someone is disengaged. We can sense when a person is looking through us rather than at us. When you consistently offer this hollow presence to your family or friends, they begin to feel undervalued. They interpret your exhaustion as a lack of interest. They start to believe that you do not care about their lives or their feelings. They do not see the invisible weight you are carrying. They do not see the thousands of micro decisions you made before noon. They only see that you are checking your phone while they are talking, or that you are zoning out during dinner. This creates a dangerous feedback loop. Your partner or friend feels neglected, so they might press harder for connection. They might ask more questions or demand more attention. To your exhausted brain, this feels like an attack. It feels like more work. So, you withdraw further. You build the wall higher to protect your remaining shred of energy. This withdrawal often manifests as social avoidance. We have all sent the cancellation text. You know the one. You made plans with friends 2 weeks ago. At the time it sounded fun. You were optimistic. But as the day approaches, the event starts to feel like a looming deadline. It feels like another task on your to-do list. You look at your calendar and you dread the energy it will take to get dressed and drive there and make conversation. So you cancel. You say you are not feeling well. And that is the truth. You are not sick with a flu, but you are sick with exhaustion. You tell yourself that you just need one night off to recover. But one night becomes 2, and 2 becomes a month. Slowly you drift to the periphery of your social circle. You stop getting invited because you always say no. The tragedy here is that social connection is one of the best ways to recharge the human spirit. Laughter and camaraderie release dopamine and oxytocin. These are neurochemicals that help combat stress. By isolating yourself to save energy, you are actually cutting yourself off from a vital power source. You end up alone in a room scrolling through your phone, which drains you further, rather than going out and getting the connection that might restore you. This isolation is not just physical, it is emotional. Mental exhaustion strips away your ability to empathize. Empathy is expensive. It costs mental resources to step outside of your own perspective and imagine how someone else feels. It takes effort to validate another person's emotions when you are drowning in your own. When you are running on empty, you become necessarily self-centered. This is not a character flaw. It is a survival mechanism. Your brain is trying to keep you afloat, so it stops allocating energy to understanding others. This leads to a feeling of profound disconnection. You might feel like nobody understands how tired you are. You might feel resentful that people keep expecting things from you. You look at your phone and see messages waiting for a reply, and you feel a spike of anxiety. Every notification represents a debt you cannot pay. You start to view your friends and family as creditors, coming to collect energy that you simply do not have. The impact on intimacy is severe. In romantic relationships, mental exhaustion is often the silent killer of passion. At the end of the day, you might just want to be left alone. You might recoil from touch because you are touched out and talked out. Your partner might interpret this as rejection. They might think you have lost attraction to them. In reality, your sensory processing system is overloaded. You cannot handle another input. You crave sensory deprivation. This misunderstanding creates a rift that grows wider with every silent evening. We also have to talk about decision fatigue in the context of relationships. A marriage or a partnership is essentially a small organisation that requires constant management. You have to decide what to eat and where to go on vacation, and how to budget and who is picking up the kids. When you are mentally exhausted, even the smallest decision feels like lifting a heavy weight. The question of what is for dinner becomes a battlefield. You might say you do not care. You might tell your partner to just pick something. If they push back and ask for your input, you might snap. Why is this happening? It is because decision-making burns glucose. By 7 p.m., you are running on fumes. You want someone else to take the wheel. If your partner is also mentally exhausted, you end up in a stalemate where neither of you has the capacity to lead. This leads to inertia and frustration, and a household that feels chaotic rather than restful. There is also the issue of memory. As we discussed in previous chapters, mental exhaustion impairs the hippocampus, which is the part of the brain responsible for memory formation. In a relationship, this looks like forgetting promises. It looks like forgetting to pick up the dry cleaning, or forgetting that you agreed to a lunch date. It looks like your partner telling you something important and you having zero recollection of the conversation 2 days later. To the other person, this looks like disrespect. It looks like you do not value their words. You find yourself apologizing constantly. You say, "I am sorry, I just forgot." You say, "My brain is scattered," but after the 10th time the apology loses its weight. Trust begins to erode. Your partner stops relying on you for things because they know you are likely to drop the ball. You begin to feel like a passenger in your own life rather than a co-pilot. This dynamic creates a profound sense of loneliness for both parties. You feel lonely because you are trapped inside a fog of fatigue that no one else seems to see. Your loved ones feel lonely because they have lost access to your true self. The vibrant and engaged and patient person they know has been replaced by a shell that is just trying to make it to bedtime. This social toll is often what finally pushes people to seek help. You might be able to tolerate low productivity at work. You might be able to ignore the headaches or the poor sleep. But when you realize that you are hurting the people you love, it becomes impossible to ignore. When you see the look of hurt in your child's eyes because you yelled at them for being too loud. When you see the resignation in your partner's face when you cancel date night again. That is when the reality of mental exhaustion hits home. The danger is that we often misdiagnose the problem. We think we have relationship problems. We think we have fallen out of love or that we have grown apart. We go to therapy to talk about communication styles. We read books on marriage, and while those things have value, they often miss the root cause. You cannot communicate effectively if your brain is offline. You cannot be a romantic partner if you are in survival mode. You do not have a relationship problem. You have an energy problem. Recognizing this distinction is the first step toward tearing down the wall. It allows you to shift the narrative. Instead of seeing yourself as a bad friend or a bad partner, you can see yourself as an exhausted human who needs to refuel. Instead of seeing your loved ones as demanding, you can see that they are simply trying to reach you through the fog. It is crucial to vocalize this state to the people around you. There is a massive difference between silence and explanation. Silence builds walls. Explanation builds bridges. Telling your partner that you are at 0% battery is different from just ignoring them. Saying that you want to hear their story, but you need 20 minutes of quiet first, is better than pretending to listen. We have to stop viewing our social energy as an infinite resource. It is finite. It is precious. When you squander it on shallow distractions or worry or overthinking, you have nothing left for the deep connections that actually give life meaning. The people in your life deserve the best of you, not just what is left of you. But you cannot give what you do not have. You cannot pour from an empty cup. This is why addressing mental exhaustion is not a selfish act. It is an act of service to everyone around you. By reclaiming your mental clarity and your energy, you are reclaiming your ability to be a present father, or a patient mother, or a listening friend. You are reclaiming your ability to show up. The wall between us is not permanent. It is built brick by brick through exhaustion, but it can be dismantled brick by brick through rest and awareness. As we move into the next chapter, we are going to look at another area where this silent danger wreaks havoc. We have looked at the brain and the body and the relationships. Now we must look at the work itself. We often think that pushing through exhaustion makes us more productive. We wear our busyness like a badge of honor. But as we will see in Chapter 7, this is a dangerous illusion. The exhausted mind is not a productive mind. It is a busy mind that is running in circles. We are going to explore the productivity trap and why working harder is often the exact wrong solution when your mental tank is empty. The wall between you and your loved ones is high, but the wall between you and your potential is just as formidable. Let us explore how to break through it. Chapter 7. The hamster wheel. You are sitting at your desk. The glow of the monitor is the only light in the room. You have been staring at the same email draft for 20 minutes. You know what you need to write. You know the key points. You know the tone required, but the words are not coming. Your cursor blinks in a steady, mocking rhythm. You delete a sentence. You type it again. It sounds wrong. You check your phone. You check the news. You go back to the email. Another 10 minutes have passed. You feel a heavy fog pressing against the front of your skull. You are working hard. You are trying. You are putting in the hours, but you are not moving forward. Welcome to the hamster wheel. This is the productivity trap. It is the cruelest paradox of mental exhaustion. The more tired you become, the harder you try to work. And the harder you work while exhausted, the less you actually accomplish. It is a cycle of diminishing returns that traps millions of high performers every single day. We are culturally conditioned to believe that output is a direct result of input. If we want more results, we simply need to apply more effort. We treat our brains like machines that just need more fuel to keep the gears turning. But the brain is not a machine. It is a biological organ with distinct limits and specific requirements for recovery. When you ignore those limits, you do not just slow down. You enter a state of phantom productivity. This is where you feel incredibly busy, but produce very little of value. You are running as fast as you can, but the scenery never changes. Let us look at why high performers are the most at risk. If you are listening to this book, you are likely someone who cares deeply about your output. You have goals, you have ambition, you have a history of pushing through obstacles. That trait is usually your superpower. It is what got you through university or built your career. But when it comes to mental exhaustion, that same trait becomes your greatest liability. High performers are used to overriding their body signals. You learn to ignore hunger to finish a project. You learn to skip sleep to meet a deadline. You view fatigue as a weakness to be conquered rather than a signal to be heeded. When mental exhaustion sets in, the high performer digs in their heels. They refuse to step away. They convince themselves that if they just sit at the desk for 2 more hours, they will break through. But biology does not negotiate with ambition. When your brain is exhausted, your executive function declines. This is the part of your brain responsible for decision-making and emotional regulation and focus. When it is depleted, you lose the ability to filter out distractions. This is why you find yourself suddenly checking social media without consciously deciding to do so. It is not a lack of discipline. It is a lack of neural energy. Your brain is seeking a low-energy activity because it no longer has the fuel to maintain high-level focus. This leads to the phenomenon of overworking while underperforming. Imagine a runner trying to sprint with a fractured ankle. They are exerting a tremendous amount of effort. They are sweating and grimacing and pushing their pain tolerance to the absolute limit. To an outside observer, they look like they are working incredibly hard, but their pace is slow, their form is terrible, and they are causing long-term damage to the injury. This is you when you try to power through mental fog. You might spend 10 hours at the office but only produce 2 hours of quality work. The rest of the time is spent correcting mistakes and rereading paragraphs and struggling to recall simple information. You are burning the candle at both ends, but the light is dimming. This dynamic creates a breeding ground for procrastination. We need to redefine what procrastination actually is in the context of mental exhaustion. Most people view procrastination as a moral failing. They think they are being lazy. They think they lack willpower. They chastise themselves for not having the drive to just do the work. But often procrastination is not about laziness at all. It is a defense mechanism. It is your brain hitting the emergency brake. When you are mentally exhausted, the idea of starting a complex task feels physically painful. Your brain assesses the energy required to write that report or solve that problem, and it checks the energy reserves available. When it sees the tank is empty, it refuses to engage the ignition. You sit there trying to force yourself to work, but your mind slides off the task like water off a duck. You might find yourself cleaning your desk, or organising your computer files, or answering trivial emails. This brings us to the illusion of being busy. The exhausted brain loves low-value tasks. Checking an email feels like work. Responding to a Slack message feels like work. Making a to-do list feels like work. These activities provide a tiny hit of dopamine. You get to check a box. You get to feel a momentary sense of completion. It soothes the anxiety of not being productive. But this is a trap. You can spend an entire day clearing your inbox and organising folders and leave the office feeling utterly drained, yet having accomplished nothing of significance. You were busy every second of the day. You never stopped moving, but you made no progress on your actual goals. This is the hamster wheel in its purest form. It's motion without destination. The danger here is that this busyness validates your exhaustion. You tell yourself that you are tired because you worked so hard. You look at the hours logged and you feel justified in your fatigue. But deep down, there is a gnawing sense of dissatisfaction. You know the big projects are stalling. You know your creativity is drying up. You know you are becoming a taskmaster rather than a creator. This leads to a frantic internal monologue. You start to panic about falling behind. So you promise yourself you will work harder tomorrow. You will wake up earlier. You will drink more coffee. You will force yourself to focus. You double down on the very strategy that caused the problem in the first place. Consider the decision fatigue that plagues the exhausted mind. Every choice you make throughout the day costs energy. What to wear, what to eat, how to phrase an email, whether to accept a meeting invite. When you are fresh, these decisions are automatic and easy. When you are mentally exhausted, every single one feels like lifting a heavy weight. By 2 in the afternoon, you might find yourself unable to decide on something as simple as what to have for dinner. At work, this manifests as avoidance. You delay making important calls because you cannot face the mental load of the conversation. You put off complex problem solving because you cannot hold all the variables in your head at once. So the work piles up, the backlog grows, the pressure mounts, and as the pressure mounts, the anxiety increases. Now you are not just exhausted, you are stressed. Stress hormones like cortisol flood your system. These hormones are designed for short bursts of physical danger, not for chronic mental strain. They keep you in a state of high alert. This prevents you from relaxing even when you do step away from the work. You bring the hamster wheel home with you. You are sitting at the dinner table, but your mind is still churning over the unfinished tasks. You're watching a movie with your partner, but you are checking your phone during the quiet scenes. You are lying in bed trying to sleep, but your brain is reviewing the day and listing everything you failed to do. You are never fully working and you are never fully resting. You are stuck in a grey zone of semi-functioning misery. This state destroys creativity. Innovation requires a surplus of mental energy. It requires the brain to make loose connections between disparate ideas. It needs space to wander. When you are mentally exhausted, your brain enters survival mode. It becomes rigid and risk-averse. It sticks to what it knows. It follows established patterns because they require less energy. If your job relies on problem-solving or strategy or creative thinking, mental exhaustion is not just an inconvenience, it is a career killer. You become a factory worker in a knowledge economy. You are assembling the pieces, but you are not designing the product. Let us look at the social comparison that fuels this fire. We live in a culture that fetishizes hustle. We scroll through social media and see peers who seem to be doing it all. They are running companies and training for marathons and raising perfect children and reading 50 books a year. We look at their curated highlight reels and we feel inadequate. We think that if we are tired, it means we are not enough. We think we just need to hack our routine or optimize our schedule. We treat our exhaustion as a puzzle to be solved with better time management. But time management is useless if you have no energy management. You can schedule every minute of your day perfectly. You can have the best apps and the most organized calendar in the world. But if your brain is foggy and your neurons are firing slowly, that schedule is nothing more than a wish list. The productivity trap convinces you that the solution to being overwhelmed is to do more. It whispers that if you can just clear the deck, you will finally find peace. If you can just get to the bottom of the inbox, you will be able to rest. This is a lie. The inbox has no bottom. The work never ends. The only way to exit the hamster wheel is to stop running. This feels counterintuitive. It feels dangerous. When you are falling behind, the last thing you want to do is stop. Your instinct screams that you need to run faster to catch up. But you must understand the physics of your own mind. Energy is a finite resource. It is like a bank account. You can go into debt for a little while. You can pull an all-nighter or push through a stressful week. That is an overdraft. But you have to pay it back. If you stay in the red for too long, the bank shuts down your account. That is burnout. The productivity trap is the phase just before the account gets frozen. It is the frantic attempt to spend money you do not have. Recognizing that you are in this trap is the first step. You have to admit that your current strategy of pushing harder is failing. You have to look at your output objectively. Are you actually being effective? Or are you just being busy? Are you staring at the screen for 12 hours to do 3 hours of work? If the answer is yes, you are not lazy. You are not broken. You are simply bankrupt of energy. The guilt you feel when you are not working is a symptom of the exhaustion. It is a false signal. It is the anxiety of the hamster wheel telling you that if you stop moving, you will fall off. But you are not running a race. You are building a life, and you cannot build anything on a foundation of fatigue. We often think of focus as a beam of light that we direct at a task. But focus is actually an act of suppression. To focus on one thing, your brain has to actively suppress everything else. It has to suppress the sound of the air conditioner. It has to suppress the itch on your arm. It has to suppress the memory of the conversation you had yesterday. This suppression costs energy. When you are mentally exhausted, you lose the strength to suppress the noise. The world becomes overwhelming. Distractions flood in. You blame yourself for having a short attention span, but in reality your brain is just too tired to hold the door shut against the chaos. This is why the exhausted worker is often the most distractible worker. It is why you find yourself reading the same sentence 3 times. It is why you open a new tab and immediately forget what you were looking for. These are not signs of incompetence. They are biological markers of depletion. The hamster wheel is seductive because it offers the illusion of control. As long as you are moving, you feel like you are doing something about your situation. Standing still feels like surrender, but sometimes standing still is the only way to find your bearings. In the productivity trap, we prioritize the urgent over the important. The urgent screams at us, the phone ringing, the notification pinging, the deadline looming. The important tasks are often quiet, planning for the future, building relationships, resting. These things do not demand our attention in the moment, so they are the first to be sacrificed when energy is low. But these are the things that sustain us. By sacrificing the important for the urgent, we hollow out our lives. We become reactive machines, responding to stimuli rather than autonomous humans making choices. You might be thinking that you cannot afford to stop. You have a mortgage. You have a boss. You have responsibilities. The world will not wait for you to recharge. This is a valid fear, but you must weigh it against the reality of your trajectory. If you stay on the wheel, you will eventually stumble. The quality of your work will continue to degrade. Your relationships will continue to suffer. Your health will eventually force you to stop. It is better to choose to stop than to be forced to stop. Stepping off the wheel does not mean quitting your job or abandoning your responsibilities. It means changing the way you engage with your work. It means recognizing that intensity is not a substitute for clarity. It means understanding that rest is not the opposite of work. It is a necessary component of it. In the coming chapters, we will discuss exactly how to do this. We will look at practical strategies to reclaim your focus and rebuild your energy reserves. But before you can apply those tools, you must accept the premise of this chapter. You cannot outwork mental exhaustion. You cannot hustle your way out of a depleted battery. The harder you run, the more tired you get and the slower you go. Take a moment to evaluate your last week of work. Look at the times when you felt most frustrated. Look at the tasks that took 3 times longer than they should have. Look at the moments when you snapped at a colleague or zoned out in a meeting. Label these moments for what they are. They are not failures of character. They are the friction burns of the hamster wheel. The illusion is that if you run fast enough, you will eventually reach a place where everything is done and you can finally relax. But the wheel is a circle. There is no finish line on a circle. You will simply arrive back where you started, only more tired than before. To move forward, you have to step off. You have to break the cycle of phantom productivity. You have to realize that a rested brain working for 4 hours is infinitely more valuable than an exhausted brain struggling for 12. It is time to stop confusing motion with progress. It is time to stop measuring your worth by your exhaustion. The wheel will keep spinning if you let it. The question is whether you will keep running. Chapter 8. Pulling the plug. We have spent the last 7 chapters diagnosing the problem. We have looked at the fog that clouds your thinking and the invisible weight that drags you down. We have analysed the 1,000 notifications that fracture your attention and the spinning wheel of obsessive thoughts. We have seen how the body eventually pays the bill for the mind's debts and how our relationships suffer in the silence of our exhaustion. You understand the trap of the hamster wheel. You know that productivity without recovery is a road that leads nowhere. Now we arrive at the turning point. This is where we stop analysing the damage and start fixing the engine. This chapter is about recharging the mind. It is not about taking a year off to live on a remote island, nor is it about spending thousands of dollars on a wellness retreat. It is about the practical, immediate, and often difficult act of pulling the plug. To understand why this is necessary, we must first address a dangerous misconception about rest. Most people today do not know how to rest. We confuse resting with numbing. Picture the end of a long, mentally draining day. You have made decisions, managed crises, and navigated complex social dynamics. Your brain feels like a sponge that has been squeezed dry. You collapse onto your couch. You have zero energy left. So what do? You reach into your pocket, pull out your phone, and start scrolling. Or you turn on the television and binge watch a series while simultaneously checking emails on a tablet. You tell yourself this is relaxation. You are not working, you are not moving, you are being entertained. But to your exhausted brain, this is not rest. This is just a different kind of stimulation. When you scroll through social media, your brain is still processing massive amounts of information. It is judging images, reading text, interpreting social cues, and triggering dopamine responses. It is comparing your life to others. It is reacting to headlines. The visual cortex is firing. The emotional centers are active. You are feeding a tired horse more oats and telling it to keep running, just on a different track. Real rest requires a cessation of input. It requires pulling the plug on the constant stream of data that floods your neural pathways. This brings us to the first actionable strategy for reclaiming your mental energy. We call it the micro break. In the pursuit of productivity, we often convince ourselves that we must power through. We think that if we stop, we will lose our momentum. We believe that efficiency means sitting in the chair for 4 hours straight. Biology tells us otherwise. Your brain operates in cycles. Just as you have sleep cycles at night, you have energy cycles during the day. These are called ultradian rhythms. Typically, the brain can maintain high-quality focus for about 90 minutes. After that, efficiency drops, error rates rise, and mental fatigue sets in. If you push past this signal, you are running on reserve power. This is where the stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline kick in to keep you awake. You feel wired but tired. The solution is the micro break. This is not a 30-minute lunch. This is a deliberate pause of 2 to 5 minutes, taken every hour or 90 minutes. The rules for a micro break are simple but strict. Rule 1 is no screens. You cannot switch from your work screen to your phone screen. That defeats the purpose. Rule 2 is a change of state. If you have been sitting, stand up. If you have been looking at a spreadsheet close to your face, look at something far away. There is a concept in environmental psychology called soft fascination. It refers to environments or stimuli that hold your attention without effort. Think of watching clouds move across the sky, looking at the leaves of a tree fluttering in the wind, or watching rain fall against a window. This kind of attention is restorative. It allows the directed attention part of your brain, the part you use for work, to recover. During your micro break, try to engage in soft fascination. Walk to a window. Look at the horizon. If you are in a windowless room, close your eyes. Let the visual processing center of your brain go dark for a moment. Take 5 deep breaths. Feel the ground under your feet. This brief reset clears the cache of your working memory. When you return to your task, you will find that the fog has lifted slightly. These small pauses protect you from the cumulative damage of a long day. They prevent the stress from compounding until you reach that breaking point in the evening. However, micro breaks are only the first line of defense. To truly heal mental exhaustion, we must address the elephant in the room. We must talk about your relationship with digital devices. Digital detox is a trendy phrase that often suggests something extreme, like locking your phone in a safe for a weekend. While that can be beneficial, it is not always practical. Instead, we need to build a sustainable wall between your mind and the digital world. The modern smartphone is designed to be addictive. It is engineered to exploit your brain's desire for novelty and social connection. Every notification is a demand for your attention. Every red dot is a tiny emergency. When you are mentally exhausted, your impulse control is weak. You are more likely to succumb to the endless scroll because you lack the energy to resist. You must create friction. If you want to stop eating junk food, you do not keep a bowl of candy on your desk. You put it in a high cupboard in the kitchen. You make it hard to reach. You must do the same with your digital inputs. Start with your bedroom. This is the most critical sanctuary for mental recovery. If your phone is the last thing you see at night and the first thing you see in the morning, you are never truly off the clock. You are priming your brain for anxiety before you even get out of bed. Buy a standard alarm clock. Charge your phone in the kitchen or the living room. This single change can revolutionize your sleep quality and your morning mental state. Next, establish tech-free zones or times. Perhaps the dinner table is a no-phone zone. Perhaps the first hour of your morning is offline. When you remove the option of digital distraction, you might initially feel anxiety. You might feel bored. Embrace that boredom. Boredom is not a defect. It is a biological signal. In a state of boredom, your brain turns inward. It starts to process the events of the day. It makes connections. It consolidates memory. When you fill every spare second with a podcast or a text message, you rob your brain of the downtime it needs to do its housekeeping. Allow yourself to stare into space while waiting for the coffee to brew. Let your mind wander while you fold laundry. These moments of low stimulation are where mental energy is regenerated. Now let us discuss the practice of mindfulness. Often, when people hear the word mindfulness, they think of monks in robes or complex spiritual rituals. We are not talking about that. We are talking about a cognitive exercise. We are talking about attention training. Mental exhaustion often comes from time traveling. Your mind is either ruminating on the past, replaying arguments and mistakes, or it is projecting into the future, worrying about deadlines and catastrophes. This time traveling consumes an immense amount of energy. Mindfulness is simply the act of bringing your attention to the present moment. It is an anchor. You do not need to sit cross-legged on the floor to do this. You can do it right now. Focus your attention on the sensation of gravity. Feel the weight of your body in your chair or your feet on the floor. Notice the temperature of the air on your skin. Listen to the background noise of the room. When you do this, you are pulling your resources away from the worry loops and back to immediate reality. A practical way to integrate this is the concept of a transition ritual. For many of us, the boundary between work and rest has dissolved. We carry the stress of the office home with us, or if we work from home, we simply move from the desk to the sofa. The brain never gets a clear signal that the workday is over. You need to create a physiological and psychological signal that says it is time to power down. This could be a change of clothes. The moment you finish work, you change out of your work clothes into something comfortable. It could be a walk around the block. You leave your house, walk for 10 minutes, and when you return, you are entering a place of rest. It could be a specific playlist you listen to while you tidy up your workspace. The specific action does not matter as much as the consistency. You are training your brain to recognize the cue. When the transition ritual happens, the brain knows it is safe to drop the high alert status. It can lower the cortisol production. It can switch from problem-solving mode to recovery mode. As we implement these strategies, we must also look at how we structure our focus. Multitasking is the enemy of mental energy. We discussed this in Chapter 2, but the solution is worth repeating here. Single tasking is rest for the brain. When you focus on one thing at a time, you reduce the metabolic cost of cognition. You stop the rapid switching that drains your battery. If you are washing the dishes, just wash the dishes. Do not try to listen to the news and plan your schedule at the same time. If you are writing a report, close every other tab. Turn off your email. There is a profound relief in doing one thing. It quiets the noise. It allows you to enter a state of flow where the work feels effortless rather than straining. Let us put this all together into a daily framework for recharging. Your day begins without a screen. You wake up and allow your brain to come online gradually. You hydrate. You see natural light. Throughout your workday, you respect your ultradian rhythms. You work hard for a burst, and then you take a micro break. You stand up. You look out the window. You breathe. When you feel the urge to check your phone for no reason, you recognize it as a symptom of fatigue or boredom. You resist the urge. You take a sip of water instead. You choose friction over convenience. At the end of the workday, you perform your transition ritual. You signal to your body that the hunt is over. You put your digital devices in their designated charging spots away from your immediate reach. In the evening, you engage in activities that are actually restorative. You might read a physical book. You might cook a meal, focusing on the smells and the chopping of vegetables. You might have a conversation with a partner or a friend where you are fully present, listening to their voice rather than glancing at a screen. And finally, you prioritize sleep. You understand that sleep is the ultimate mental reset. It is the time when your brain physically cleans itself, flushing out the metabolic waste products that accumulate during the day. You protect your sleep environment with the same ferocity that you protect your home. This process of pulling the plug will feel uncomfortable at first. You will feel the phantom vibration of your phone. You will feel the itch of understimulation. You might feel guilty, as if sitting still is a sin against productivity. This is the withdrawal speaking. It is the sound of a brain that has been over-revved for too long coming down to a natural idle. Give it time. As you persist, you will notice something remarkable. The fog begins to clear. Your patience returns. You can read a paragraph without your mind wandering. You can listen to a friend without waiting for your turn to speak. The colours of the world seem a little brighter. You are reclaiming your mind. You are taking back the energy that was being siphoned off by distraction and worry. Pulling the plug is not an act of weakness. It is an act of strategic preservation. It is the only way to ensure that when you do plug back in, you have the power to shine brightly. By mastering the art of the recharge, you are preparing yourself for the long game. You are building the foundation for resilience. But how do we maintain this? How do we ensure that these new habits stick when life gets chaotic and the pressure mounts? How do we prevent ourselves from sliding back into the abyss of exhaustion? That is the challenge of long-term prevention. That is where we turn our attention next. We must move from immediate triage to permanent structural integrity. We must learn how to build a mind that is not just recovered, but resilient. Chapter 9, Building the Fortress. We have spent the last few chapters discussing damage control. We identified the fog. We traced it back to the notifications and the spinning wheels of our daily lives. We looked at the physical toll and the way it erodes our relationships. In the previous chapter, we finally pulled the plug. We learned how to stop the noise and take a breath. But stopping the noise is a temporary fix. It is like bailing water out of a sinking boat. It keeps you afloat for now, but unless you plug the hole, the water will come back. You cannot live your entire life in a state of emergency repair. You cannot simply crash, burn out, recover, and then repeat the cycle. That is not a life. That is just survival. To truly defeat mental exhaustion, we must move from reactive measures to proactive architecture. We need to stop relying on willpower to get us through the day and start relying on a system that protects us. We are going to build a fortress. When I say fortress, I do not mean you should wall yourself off from the world. I do not mean becoming cold or distant or rigid. A fortress in this context is a structure of habits, boundaries, and mental models that keeps your energy safe. It allows you to open the gates when you choose and close them when you need to recover. It gives you a safe harbour where the chaos of the world cannot reach you unless you invite it in. This chapter is about long-term prevention. It is about building mental resilience so that when the stress comes, and it will come, you do not break. Let us begin with the foundation. The foundation of your fortress is resilience. There is a misconception about resilience. Many people think resilience means being tough. They imagine a person who can take hit after hit without flinching. They think of a stone wall that never moves. But stone walls eventually crack. If you hit stone enough times, it turns to dust. True mental resilience is not about hardness. It is about elasticity. Think of a tree in a storm. The rigid oak might snap if the wind is strong enough. The willow survives because it bends. It moves with the wind and then returns to its center when the storm passes. Building this kind of resilience requires a shift in how you view stress. You cannot eliminate all stress from your life. That is impossible. What you can do is change your recovery time. Resilience is measured by how quickly you return to your baseline after a stressful event. To build this elasticity, you must practice what psychologists call stress inoculation. This sounds technical, but the concept is simple. You expose yourself to manageable challenges, and then you rest. It is exactly like weightlifting. You tear the muscle slightly, then you let it repair and it grows back stronger. The problem is that most of us skip the repair phase. We just keep lifting the weight until the muscle tears completely. To build the foundation of your fortress, you need to respect the oscillation of energy. You need to treat rest as a discipline as serious as your work. This leads us to the walls of the fortress. These are your boundaries. We have touched on boundaries before, but now we must cement them. A boundary is not just saying no to a request. A boundary is a rule you set for yourself about how you engage with the world. One of the most critical walls you can build is an emotional boundary. We often exhaust ourselves by carrying emotions that do not belong to us. We absorb the anxiety of our partner. We take on the frustration of our boss. We carry the sadness of a friend. Empathy is a beautiful human trait, but unchecked empathy is a leak in your fortress. You must learn to distinguish between supporting someone and carrying them. You can stand beside someone in a hole without jumping in with them. When you jump in, you both get stuck. When you stay on solid ground, you are strong enough to pull them out. Building this wall requires you to pause before you emotionally engage. When you feel that wave of secondhand stress washing over you, take a step back. Ask yourself, is this my problem to solve? Is this my emotion to feel? If the answer is no, you can offer compassion without offering your own energy reserve. Another section of your fortress wall is your information boundary. We discussed the dangers of information overload earlier, but preventing it long-term requires a structural change. You cannot rely on willpower to ignore your phone. You need a system that makes ignoring it the default. This might mean physical separation. It might mean leaving your phone in another room while you sleep or while you work. It might mean deleting apps that serve no purpose other than to drain your attention. These are the bricks of your wall. Every time you remove a distraction, you place another brick. Eventually, you have a sanctuary where your mind can actually focus. Now let us talk about the drawbridge. This represents your attention. Your attention is the most valuable resource you possess. It is more valuable than your time and more valuable than your money. Everyone wants it. Advertisers want it. Your employer wants it. Your family wants it. The news wants it. In a poorly defended mind, the drawbridge is always down. Anyone can walk in at any time. A notification pings and you look. A colleague interrupts and you listen. A worrying thought pops up and you chase it. This constant traffic wears down the path to your inner self. It leaves you feeling trampled. Building the fortress means you control the drawbridge. You decide who gets in and when. This is where the practice of deep work comes into play. Deep work is the ability to focus without distraction on a cognitively demanding task. It is a state of flow where you are fully engaged. When you are in a state of deep work, the drawbridge is up. You are inaccessible. This might feel selfish at first. We are conditioned to be available. We are taught that being responsive is a sign of a good worker or a good friend. But constant responsiveness leads to shallow work and shallow relationships. By guarding your attention, you actually have more to give. When you lower the drawbridge, you are fully present. You are not checking your email while talking to your spouse. You are not worrying about a deadline while playing with your kids. You are there. To operate the drawbridge effectively, you need to understand your own rhythms. This is part of the fortress maintenance. You need to know when your energy is high and when it is low. Most people have a peak period of mental clarity. For some it is early morning. For others it is late at night. You must identify this time and protect it fiercely. Do not waste your peak energy on administrative tasks or checking emails. That is like using gold to pave a driveway. Use your peak energy for your most important work or your most meaningful interactions. Save the low energy tasks for when your mental battery is already draining. Now we must look at the supply lines. A fortress cannot survive a siege without food and water. Your brain cannot survive without physical support. We touched on the physical costs of exhaustion, but prevention is about fueling the machine before it breaks down. This goes beyond just getting enough sleep. It is about how you treat your body during the day. Are you dehydrated? Most people are. Even mild dehydration causes a drop in cognitive function. It leads to headaches and fatigue that we often mistake for mental exhaustion. Are you moving? Your brain was evolved to exist in a moving body. When you sit stagnant for hours, your blood flow slows down. The oxygen supply to your brain dips. The fortress gets stuffy. You need to open the windows. Even a 10-minute walk can reset your neurochemistry. It clears out the stress hormones and brings in fresh oxygen. Are you eating for energy or for comfort? Sugar and processed carbohydrates give you a quick spike, but they are followed by a crash. That crash feels exactly like mental exhaustion. It is a brain fog induced by biology. Stabilizing your blood sugar is a key part of reinforcing your walls. Let us move deeper into the keep. The keep is the central tower of the fortress. It is the safest place. This represents your core self and your internal dialogue. Often the enemy is not outside the walls. The enemy is inside. It is the voice of the inner critic. It is the obsessive thought loops. It is the perfectionism that tells you nothing is ever good enough. If you have strong walls but a toxic internal environment, you will still burn out. You will rot from the inside. Prevention requires a new way of talking to yourself. It requires self-compassion. This is not soft. It is strategic. Research shows that people who practice self-compassion are more resilient to stress. They bounce back faster from failure. They are less likely to procrastinate. When you beat yourself up for being tired, you are adding a second layer of exhaustion. You are tired from the work, and now you are tired from the guilt. You have to stop the civil war inside your head. When you feel the fatigue setting in, do not attack yourself. Do not say I am lazy or I am weak. Instead, treat yourself as you would a valuable asset. If your car started making a strange noise, you would not kick it. You would check the engine. You would see if it needs oil. Treat your mind with the same pragmatic care. Say to yourself, I am running low on fuel. I need to refill. This shift in language removes the emotional weight from the physical sensation. It turns a crisis into a maintenance issue. Another crucial part of the internal keep is processing emotion. We often repress negative emotions to keep working. We push down the frustration. We swallow the anger. We ignore the sadness. But these emotions do not disappear. They stay in the basement of the fortress. They accumulate. Eventually they explode, and they can blow the whole structure apart. Emotional self-care is the practice of regularly clearing out the basement. It means giving yourself time to feel what you need to feel. It might mean journaling. It might mean talking to a therapist or a trusted friend. It might just mean sitting in silence and letting the wave of emotion pass through you. When you process an emotion, you release the energy it was holding. You free up that space for focus and creativity. As we build this fortress, we must also look at the landscape around us. Who are your allies? Social connections can be a source of exhaustion, but they can also be your greatest defense. Isolation is dangerous. When you are alone with your stress, it magnifies. When you share it, it dilutes. You need a circle of trust. These are people who do not need you to perform. They do not need you to be perfect. They just need you to be you. Spending time with these people is restorative. It repairs the cracks in your walls. Be deliberate about who you let into the inner sanctum. Not everyone deserves access to your energy. There are people who are energy vampires. They feed on drama and negativity. You can be polite to them from the top of the wall, but do not lower the drawbridge. Keep them at a safe distance. Finally, let us talk about maintenance. A fortress is never finished. It requires constant upkeep. You will have days where the walls crumble. You will have days where the drawbridge gets stuck in the down position. You will have days where the inner critic takes over. That is normal. That is being human. The goal is not perfection. The goal is awareness. The goal is to notice the damage earlier. Instead of waiting until you have a total collapse, you notice a loose brick. You notice that you are starting to feel irritable. You notice that your sleep is slipping. You notice that you are checking your phone too much because you have built the fortress. You know what to do. You do not panic. You just start the repairs. You go to bed an hour early. You say no to that extra commitment. You take a long walk. You do the maintenance work before it becomes a disaster. This is the art of sustainable living. It is the difference between a life of constant crisis and a life of steady growth. You are building a structure that can house your ambition, your creativity, and your love. You are protecting the asset that makes everything else possible. You are protecting your mind. This fortress allows you to work hard without burning out. It allows you to care deeply without being consumed. It allows you to be productive and peaceful at the same time. It takes time to build. You cannot do it all in a day. You place one brick at a time. You set one boundary. You change one habit. You adjust one thought pattern. Slowly the walls go up. The chaos of the world recedes. You find a quiet space in the center of your life. From this place of strength, you can do anything. You can handle the pressure. You can navigate the uncertainty. You can lead. You can create. You can live. But having the fortress is only part of the equation. You also need a daily operating system to run it. You need to know how to manage your energy from the moment you wake up to the moment you close your eyes. You need a routine that turns these abstract concepts into concrete actions. That is what we will cover in the final chapter. We will look at how to master your mental energy every single day. We will turn this fortress into a home. Chapter 10. The signal, not the setback. We have arrived at the final threshold. Throughout this journey, we have walked through the dense fog of mental fatigue, and we have pulled apart the machinery of your daily life to see where the gears are grinding. We have looked at the notifications that chip away at your attention span, and we have felt the heavy physical toll that stress extracts from your body. We have examined the friction in your relationships and the stagnation in your work. But understanding the mechanics of exhaustion is only half the battle. The most detailed map in the world is useless if you do not step forward and start walking. Chapter 10 is not about adding more information to an already overloaded brain. It is about transformation. It is about taking everything we have discussed and forging it into a lifestyle that protects you. This is where we move from diagnosis to mastery. The title of this chapter is The Signal, Not the Setback, because that is the fundamental shift you must make in your psychology. For years, you have likely viewed mental exhaustion as a failure. You treated it as a weakness or a defect in your character. You thought that if you were stronger or smarter or more disciplined, you would not feel this way. You treated your tiredness like an enemy that had to be defeated or ignored. You drank more coffee. You pushed through the headache. You criticized yourself for losing focus. You viewed the need for rest as a setback in your quest for success. We are going to flip that script entirely. Mental exhaustion is not a setback. It is a signal. It is your dashboard light blinking red. When you're driving a car and the low fuel light turns on, you do not get angry at the car. You do not smash the dashboard with your fist. You do not assume the car is broken or lazy. You simply acknowledge the data. You understand that the machine requires fuel to continue operating. You pull over. You refill the tank. You get back on the road. Your brain deserves the same objectivity. When you feel that familiar fog rolling in, or when you feel your patience snapping over something trivial, or when you find yourself reading the same sentence 3 times without absorbing it, your brain is sending you high-fidelity data. It is telling you that your cognitive load has exceeded your current capacity. The master of mental energy does not ignore this data. They do not judge it. They use it. They recognize that this signal is the most valuable tool they possess because it tells them exactly when to pull back before they drive off the cliff. Turning this awareness into action requires a strategy. We cannot rely on willpower alone because willpower is a finite resource that drains just like your energy. You need a system. You need a daily architecture that supports clarity by default. This begins with how you start your day. The average person begins their day in a state of immediate reaction. The alarm goes off, and the first thing they touch is their phone. Before their feet hit the floor, they have flooded their unready brain with news headlines and work emails and social comparison. They are already losing the game before it has begun. To master your mental energy, you must defend your morning. You need to create a buffer zone between waking up and plugging in. This does not have to be a complicated, hour-long ritual. It can be as simple as 15 minutes of unassisted existence. You wake up, you drink water, you stretch your body, you look out a window. You allow your brain to come online gradually, rather than shocking it with a fire hose of information. By delaying that first hit of digital input, you allow your prefrontal cortex to stabilize. You set the tone for the day. You decide what is important before the world decides for you. Once the day begins, the master of mental energy operates differently than the exhausted amateur. The amateur tries to sprint a marathon. They sit down at their desk and work for 5 hours straight, believing that continuous movement equals productivity. They skip lunch or eat it while typing. They view breaks as a waste of time. By 2 in the afternoon, they are a zombie staring at a screen making mistakes that will take twice as long to fix tomorrow. You will take a different approach. You will work in pulses. You understand that the brain is a biological organ that operates in cycles. You will focus intensely for 90 minutes, and then you will pull back. You will step away from the screen. You will not scroll through your phone during this break, because that is just another form of cognitive processing. You will truly disengage. You will walk around the block, or close your eyes, or do a simple task that requires no thought. You let the engine cool down. When you return to your work, you are fresh. You are sharp. You accomplish in 4 hours what the exhausted person struggles to do in 8. This rhythm protects you. It prevents the buildup of that toxic metabolic waste in the brain that we discussed in Chapter 1. But even with the best rhythm, there will be days when the load is too heavy. There will be crises and deadlines and emotional storms. This is where the concept of the red line becomes critical. Every engine has a red line. It is the maximum number of revolutions per minute the engine can sustain before it blows a gasket. You have a red line too. The problem is that most people do not know where it is until they have already crossed it, and smoke is pouring out from under the hood. You must learn to recognize your personal red line indicators. Perhaps your indicator is a specific type of headache behind the eyes. Maybe it is a tightening in your jaw or a shortness of breath. For some people, it is a change in their speech patterns, where they become terse or sarcastic. For others, it is a desire to isolate and hide. You need to become an expert in your own physiology. You need to catch these signs when they are whispers, not screams. When you see the needle approaching the red line, you must act. This is the hardest part for high performers. You have to say no. You have to disappoint people. You have to leave the email unanswered until tomorrow. You have to cancel the social obligation that you simply do not have the battery for. This feels dangerous at first. You worry that your world will fall apart if you stop spinning the plates. But here is the truth. The world is far more resilient than you think. The email can wait. The project will survive a 12-hour pause. What will not survive is your health if you keep pushing past the red line. When you respect your limits, you teach others to respect them as well. You demonstrate that your performance is high quality because you protect the machine that produces it. You are not a robot that can run indefinitely. You are a biological system that requires homeostasis. This leads us to the evening. If the morning is for defense and the day is for rhythm, then the evening is for closure. Mental exhaustion often stems from the inability to turn off. We carry the problems of the day into the sanctuary of the night. We lie in bed replaying conversations and simulating disasters. We call this revenge bedtime procrastination, where we stay up late doing nothing of value simply to reclaim a sense of freedom. To master your energy, you must build a wall between your day and your rest. You need a shutdown ritual. It can be a simple phrase you say to yourself as you close your laptop. It can be the act of writing down the 3 top priorities for tomorrow, so your brain does not have to hold on to them while you sleep. You park the car. You turn off the ignition. You walk away. This transition allows you to truly rest. And remember that rest is not just the absence of work. Rest is an active process of restoration. It is sleep, but it is also leisure that does not tax the mind. It is conversation that feeds the soul rather than draining it. It is reading or cooking or moving your body in a way that feels good. By prioritizing high-quality rest, you refill the reservoir for the next day. As you implement these changes, you will notice a shift. The fog will lift. The heavy weight on your chest will lighten. You will find that you have access to your memory again. You will find that you can listen to a friend without secretly wishing the conversation would end so you could go be alone. You will find your creativity returning like a spring that was buried under rocks. However, we must be realistic. You will not be perfect. There will be weeks where everything goes wrong. There will be times when you fall back into the trap of overworking and overthinking. You will find yourself doom scrolling at midnight. You will find yourself snapping at your partner. You will feel that old familiar exhaustion creeping back in. This is the moment of truth. The amateur thinks this means they have failed. They think the system does not work. They give up and surrender to the burnout. The master thinks differently. The master sees the slip as just another signal. It is data. It means you drifted off course. It means you neglected your maintenance. So you do not panic. You do not shame yourself. You simply correct the course. You go to bed early that night. You take a digital detox the next weekend. You reinstate the morning buffer zone. You use the tools you have learned in this book to climb back out of the hole. You treat your mental energy with the same care and precision that a professional athlete treats their body. You know that consistency is more important than intensity. Mental energy mastery is not a destination where you never get tired again. That is impossible. Mastery is the ability to navigate the landscape of your life without losing yourself. It is the confidence that comes from knowing you have the tools to handle the load. It is the refusal to be a victim of your own ambition. You now understand the silent danger. You know that mental exhaustion is a physical reality, not a character flaw. You know that your brain is a finite instrument that requires care. You know the cost of ignoring the signs. And most importantly, you know that you have the power to change it. The notifications will keep coming. The demands of the modern world will not suddenly disappear. The noise will always be there. But you do not have to let it inside. You can build the fortress. You can guard the gate. You can choose when to engage and when to withdraw. This is your life. It is the only one you have. Do not spend it in a grey haze of fatigue. Do not let the best parts of you be consumed by the friction of an unmanaged mind. Reclaim your energy. Reclaim your focus. Reclaim the vibrant, sharp present version of yourself that has been waiting behind the fog. The signal is blinking. It is time to listen. It is time to rest. And then when you are ready, it is time to rise. Conclusion. Reclaiming the spark. We have travelled a long path from that initial fog you could not shake. You now understand that mental exhaustion is not a sign of weakness, but a biological signal demanding your attention. By recognizing the hidden weight of decision fatigue and the high cost of emotional labor, you have taken the first steps toward true recovery. This journey was never about eliminating stress entirely. It was about building the resilience to navigate it without losing yourself. You now possess the tools to structure your rest and protect your focus. The spark you felt you lost has not vanished. It was simply buried under layers of unmanaged noise and constant demands. By applying these strategies, you clear that debris. You are no longer at the mercy of every notification or intrusive thought. You are back in the driver's seat. Take these lessons and turn them into a daily practice of clarity and purpose. Your mind is your greatest asset, and now you know exactly how to care for it.